Hello everybody and welcome back to American Folklore, the horror version. Let's start this with Axe Murder Hollow. This one comes from Pennsylvania. So if you're out the Pennsylvania way, I suggest watch out. And don't pick up any hitchhikers. Susan and Ned were driving through a wooded, empty section of highway. Lightning flashed, thunder roared, the sky went dark in the torrential downpour. "We'd better stop," said Susan. Ned nodded his head in agreement. He stepped on the brake, and suddenly the car started to slide on the slick pavement. They plunged off the road and slid to a halt at the bottom of an incline. Pale and shaking, Ned quickly turned to check if Susan was all right. When she nodded, Ned relaxed and looked through the rain-soaked windows. "I'm going to see how bad it is," he told Susan, and went out into the storm. She saw his blurry figure in the headlight, walking around the front of the car. A moment later, he jumped in beside her, soaking wet. "The car's not badly damaged, but we're wheel-deep in mud," he said. "I'm going to have to go for help." Susan swallowed nervously. There would be no quick rescue here. He told her to turn off the headlights and lock the doors until he returned. Axe Murder Hollow. Although Ned hasn't said the name out loud, they both knew what they had been thinking. When he told her to lock the car, he realized this place was very dangerous and gave him a very bad feeling. This was the place where a man had once taken an axe and hacked his wife to death in a jealous rage over an alleged affair. Supposedly, the axe-wielding spirit of the husband continued to haunt this section of the road. Outside the car, Susan heard a shriek, a loud thump, and a strange gurgling noise. But she couldn't see anything in the darkness. Frightened, she shrank down into her seat. She sat in silence for a while. And then she noticed another sound. Bump, bump, bump. It was a soft sound, like something being blown by the wind. Suddenly the car was illuminated by a bright light. An official-sounding voice told her to get out of the car. Ned must have found a police officer. Susan unlocked the door and stepped out of the car. As her eyes adjusted to the bright light, she saw it. Hanging by his feet from the tree next to the car was the dead body of Ned. His bloody throat had been cut so deeply that he was nearly decapitated. The wind swung the corpse back and forth so it thumped against the tree. Bump, bump, bump. Susan screamed and ran toward the voice in the light. As she drew close, she realized the light was not coming from a flashlight. Standing there was the glowing figure of a man with a smile on his face and a large, solid, and definitely real axe in his hand. She backed away from the glowing figure until she bumped into the car. "Playing around when my back was turned," the ghost whispered, stroking the sharp blade of the axe with his fingers. "You've been very naughty." The last thing she saw was the glint of the axe blade and the eerie, incandescent light. Alright, so, like I said before, if you're out near the Pennsylvania way, don't go alone. Don't go out there into the night. And most definitely, do not get out of your car when someone tells you to. Police officer or no police officer. Now, this is the story of Bloody Mary. This one is also from Pennsylvania. She lived deep in the forest in a tiny cottage, and sold herbal remedies. Okay, let's start that over. She lived deep in the forest of a tiny cottage and sold herbal remedies for a living. Folks living in the town nearby called her Bloody Mary. She said she was a witch. None dared cross the old crone for fear that their cows would go dry. Their food would rot away, and they would be froze come wintertime. They would also fear that their children might take sick of a fever, or any number of terrible things could happen if the angry witch got mad at their neighbors, or her neighbors. Then the little girls in the village began to disappear, one by one. No one could find them, and no one knew where they had gone. Grief-stricken families searched the woods, the local buildings, and all the houses and barns, but there was no sign of the missing girls. A few brave souls even went to Bloody Mary's home in the woods to see if the witch had taken the girls, but she did not have any knowledge of the disappearances. Still, it was noted that her strange appearance had changed. She no longer looked like a hag. She looked younger, more attractive. The neighbors were a little suspicious, but they could find no proof that the witch had taken the young ones. Then came the night when the daughter of the miller rose from her bed and walked outside, following an enchanted sound no one else could hear. The miller's wife had a toothache and was sitting up in the kitchen, treating the tooth with an herbal remedy when her daughter left the house. She screamed for her husband and followed the girl out the door. The miller came running in his nightshirt. Together they tried to restrain the girl, but she kept breaking away from them and heading out of town. The desperate cries of the miller and his wife woke the neighbors. They came to assist the frantic couple. Suddenly a sharp-eyed farmer gave a shout and pointed towards a strange light at the edge of the woods. A few townsmen followed him out into the field and saw Bloody Mary standing beside a large oak tree, holding a magic wand that was pointed towards the miller's house. She was glowing with an unearthly light as she set her evil spell upon the miller's daughter. The townsmen grabbed their guns and their pitchforks and ran toward the witch. When she heard the commotion, Bloody Mary broke off her spell and fled back into the woods. The far-sighted farmer had loaded his gun with the silver bullets in case the witch ever came after his daughter. Now he took aim and shot her. The bullet hit Bloody Mary in the hip, and she fell to the ground. The angry townspeople leapt upon her and carried her back to the field, where they built a huge bonfire and burned her at the stake. As she burned, Bloody Mary screamed a curse on the villagers. If anyone mentioned her name aloud in a mirror, she would send her spirit to revenge herself upon them for her terrible death. When she was dead, the villagers went to the house in the woods and found the unmarked graves of the little girls which the evil witch had murdered. She had used their blood to make her younger again. From that day to this, anyone foolish enough to chant Bloody Mary's name 3 times before a darkened mirror will summon the vengeful spirit of the witch. It is said that she will tear the bodies to pieces and rip their souls from their mutilated bodies. The souls of these unfortunate ones will burn forever in torment as Bloody Mary once burned, and they will be trapped forever in the mirror. Hope you enjoyed these stories. There'll be more to come. Peace, love. I love you all. And remember, kids, stay away from those mirrors.